At that prestigious school in America, where appearance was valued more than talent, a mocking gesture changed everything. When the school principal, confident he was just making a joke, pointed at the quietest boy in the class and asked him to go on stage, no one could have imagined what would happen next. What was meant to be a joke quickly escalated, and what happened afterward left everyone breathless. From that moment on, no one could look at that boy the same way again. Elijah Turner was a slender, quiet black boy living with his grandmother Marta in a small house in the impoverished Eastwood neighborhood, where the streets were filled with more potholes than smooth pavement, and trust in promises had long become a luxury. Elijah's family situation was dire. His grandmother worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk, doing hard labor like cleaning and laundry, to raise and care for Elijah after his mother passed away from a cruel illness, and his father left before Elijah could even speak. Despite their struggles, Elijah had a deep love for music, especially the piano, a passion passed down from his grandmother. The old piano, with yellowed and even misshapen keys, sat in the cramped basement, becoming Elijah's personal sanctuary, where he could release his frustrations and insecurities and find solace and freedom in the music. Elijah's life seemed destined to remain tied to the poor streets where he grew up, but one day, a life-changing opportunity arrived unexpectedly. Through a special scholarship program for talented students in the arts, Elijah was accepted into Lincoln High, a prestigious private school known for catering to the children of wealthy families. This was a place of luxury and arrogance, where the value of each student was often measured more by their family background and appearance than by their true abilities or talents. On his first day at Lincoln High, Elijah carried his worn-out backpack, wore slightly too short pants, and had on a pair of well-worn sneakers. He walked slowly through the gleaming hallways, where the sneering and contemptuous glances from the wealthy students were fixed on him from the moment they met him. Here, the looks and whispers seemed to tell Elijah one clear message: "You don't belong here." Even the teachers didn't bother asking his name. They coldly pointed to a seat at the back of the class, clearly isolating him from the other children. Elijah felt the sting of isolation, the feeling of being underestimated and disrespected, an emotion he had grown all too familiar with in his challenging life. But on that very first day, when Elijah faced open scorn and injustice, it also marked the beginning of a difficult journey, one where he would have to confront and overcome all the prejudices with the extraordinary talent hidden within a boy who appeared to be so fragile. The feeling of isolation on his first day at school stayed with Elijah all the way into the classroom, growing more distinct and bitter with each passing moment. Sitting quietly at the back of the class, he became invisible in the eyes of the teacher and by accident, the target of malicious stares from his classmates. He didn't dare look up, his eyes glued to his notebook, carefully writing each word, as if to avoid attracting attention. But it wasn't enough to shield Elijah from the cruel whispers that echoed in his ears. "Look at those worn-out shoes. Bet he picked them up from a trash bin." Connor, the blond, handsome boy with a face that always carried an air of arrogance and mockery, whispered loud enough for the whole class to hear. Connor, the only son of a wealthy restaurant chain owner, was used to people bending to his will and flattering him. The chuckles that followed Connor's words lingered, like they were deliberately digging deeper into Elijah's fragile self-esteem. Some of the girls sitting in front even turned around to stare at him with looks of both curiosity and pity, their lips curling into half-smiles that were cold and judgmental. The harsh words spread among them as if Elijah weren't even there. His family must live in the slums. You can tell by that torn backpack. The mockery grew louder with each passing day. It became a form of entertainment during lunch breaks when Elijah tried to find a small corner away from the crowd to eat by himself. The simple egg sandwich his grandmother Marta had hastily prepared for him that morning, the old water bottle he carefully kept, all became subjects of ridicule in front of the cruel eyes of the rich kids. Even the homeroom teacher, Mr. Stevenson, known for his strict but fair demeanor, treated him with strange indifference. He rarely called on Elijah during class, never asked how much he understood. Elijah didn't know what he was thinking, only that every time Mr. Stevenson walked down to check the students' work at the back of the class, his gaze seemed to skip over Elijah as if he were an invisible void. It only made Elijah feel more isolated, more alone with each passing day. But perhaps the most bitter experience was the odd attention of Mr. Whitaker, the revered, powerful principal of the school. One afternoon, while Elijah sat alone under a large tree at the corner of the schoolyard, trying to avoid the curious stares, Mr. Whitaker's deep, cold voice echoed from behind. "Do you play any instruments, Elijah?" Startled, Elijah turned around, confused by the sudden presence of the principal. The middle-aged man, tall, with carefully combed silver hair, wearing a flawless, expensive suit, stood there looking down at Elijah with a fake curiosity that Elijah had never seen before. "Yes, I play the piano a bit," Elijah answered quietly, his heart full of suspicion at the unexpected question. "The piano, huh?" Mr. Whitaker raised an eyebrow, his eyes flashing with a hint of hidden mockery behind his polite exterior. "Very interesting, very interesting." With that, he walked away, leaving Elijah confused. He didn't understand Mr. Whitaker's intentions, but there was something about the way he spoke that made him uneasy. It felt like something bad had been set into motion from that very moment. And indeed, the next day, Elijah fully grasped the hidden malice behind Mr. Whitaker's words. During class, the teacher announced an upcoming talent show at the school. Typically, this stage was reserved for the elite students, the children of the rich, to show off their talents and reinforce their status. But this time, the teacher's announcement made the whole class burst into mocking laughter. By special request of Principal Whitaker, the opening act for the talent show will be Elijah Turner performing a piano piece. The entire class erupted into mocking laughter. Connor clapped slowly, speaking loudly and sarcastically. "Fantastic. This show is definitely going to be a real treat." That remark hit Elijah's self-esteem like a punch to the gut. He immediately understood. Mr. Whitaker hadn't chosen him for his talent. He was being made into a public joke in front of the entire school. That afternoon, as he left the school, Elijah walked slower than usual. Each step felt like carrying the weight of the world, his heart heavy with shame and humiliation. But when he thought of his grandmother Marta's bright, proud eyes whenever she heard him play the piano, a strong determination flared up inside him. He wouldn't let anyone turn him into a laughingstock. If they wanted him on stage, he would go, but this time, he would make them look at him with a completely different perspective. Elijah's resolve had just begun to take root as he left the school gates, but the unsettling feeling from Mr. Whitaker's strange behavior lingered in his heart. Just a few days later, one afternoon, as school was about to end, Elijah heard the familiar cold voice echoing down the hallway. "Elijah Turner, come to my office for a moment." The seemingly simple request felt like a cold needle piercing his mind. Elijah swallowed hard, his steps slowing, his heart pounding rapidly. When the door to the principal's office opened, Mr. Whitaker was already waiting. In the spacious room, his imposing figure radiated power and authority, but those cold eyes hid something hard to grasp, something calculating. "Sit down, Elijah." He gestured to the chair across from him with politeness that lacked any warmth. "Do you like Lincoln High?" He began with a question that seemed to show concern, but made Elijah feel uneasy. "Yes, the school is great," Elijah replied hesitantly. Great, huh? Mr. Whitaker chuckled lightly, but his gaze remained anything but cheerful. This school is for exceptional students. Not everyone can adapt here. His tone was full of hidden meaning, clearly emphasizing Elijah's poor background. Elijah fell silent, gripping his worn-out backpack tightly on his lap, wondering what Mr. Whitaker wanted from this conversation. "I hear you play the piano, right?" Mr. Whitaker continued, his tone shifting slightly, but still tinged with an unmistakable mockery. "Yes, just a little," Elijah answered softly, choosing his words carefully. "Just a little, huh?" Mr. Whitaker leaned back in his chair, his hands folded across his chest, looking at Elijah as if examining some strange object. "Well, lucky you. The school's annual talent show is coming up. I think this is a great opportunity for you to showcase your abilities." Elijah was momentarily startled by the offer, but he was sharp enough to realize that this invitation held no good intentions. From his eyes to his tone, Mr. Whitaker clearly saw Elijah as nothing more than a joke. The offer wasn't about giving him a chance to shine. It was about making him the target of ridicule in front of the entire school. The hidden malice beneath Mr. Whitaker's politeness made Elijah feel both anger and hurt. Noticing Elijah's prolonged silence, Mr. Whitaker's voice softened slightly, as if trying to pressure him into agreeing. "Or maybe you're too scared. I mean, this stage might be too big for you. If you're feeling unsure, just let me know. I won't force you." "No, I'll play." Elijah suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with a surprising determination that left Mr. Whitaker momentarily taken aback. The principal furrowed his brow, not expecting a quiet boy like Elijah to respond so boldly. "Very well." Mr. Whitaker quickly regained his cold composure, smiling with a false confidence. "I'll be looking forward to your special performance. I hope you won't disappoint everyone." With that, he waved his hand dismissively, signaling the end of the meeting. As Elijah stood up and left the office, Mr. Whitaker's eyes followed him, never once hiding his malicious satisfaction. It was clear that his plan to make Elijah the laughingstock of the entire school and faculty was unfolding perfectly. As Elijah walked out of the office, his heart weighed heavier than ever. But deep inside him, a fierce determination was taking shape more clearly than ever before. If Principal Whitaker wanted to use him as a joke, Elijah would use this very opportunity to prove his true worth. One chance, one performance. But it would be the moment when everyone who had mocked him would be left speechless with regret. Elijah's footsteps as he left Principal Whitaker's office that day seemed heavier than ever. Each step felt like it was dragging an invisible burden, those prying eyes following him from behind, the malicious words still echoing in his head. "I hope you don't disappoint everyone." Though the principal tried to cloak his words in a veneer of politeness, Elijah understood the hidden meaning behind them. He didn't expect a serious performance. He was preparing for a cruel joke, one designed to humiliate Elijah in front of the entire school. That night, Elijah tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Lying on his small, simple bed in the dimly lit room, he stared at the ceiling, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts. He wondered if he should decline the chance to perform to avoid being humiliated in front of everyone. But then, his grandmother Marta's image flashed vividly in his mind, her weathered, calloused hands that had spent a lifetime raising and caring for him through countless struggles. Elijah remembered the sparkle in her eyes every time she heard him play the piano, and the words of encouragement she often whispered to him each night. "My son, when you play the piano, I see my whole life in it. Never be afraid of what others say about you, because your talent is a gift from God, and no one can take it from you." Her words were like gentle notes of music, weaving their way into Elijah's heart, gradually dispelling the anxiety and fear. He realized that if he backed down, he wouldn't just be betraying his grandmother's trust, but also losing the chance to prove his true worth. His determination grew stronger, clearer than ever. Elijah decided that no matter how Principal Whitaker or anyone else tried to use him, he would step onto that stage with dignity and unwavering confidence in his own abilities. The next day, when Elijah arrived at school, he didn't shy away from the curious stares like before. He walked into class with an unusual calmness, causing a few students who had been preparing their mockery to suddenly fall silent. Despite that, the atmosphere in the room remained tense, filled with ridicule and curiosity. Connor, as usual, led the way with his jabs, repeatedly bringing up the upcoming talent show with a mocking tone. "We're going to have the best comedy act ever, right? A piano player with worn-out shoes and old clothes, amazing." The class erupted into malicious laughter, but this time Elijah didn't let their mockery get to him. He understood that to change people's prejudices, he couldn't just avoid them, he had to face them head-on and walk through them with courage. In the days that followed, Elijah spent all his free time practicing. Every afternoon, after school, he quickly ran to the small basement, where the old piano was waiting, to immerse himself in the music. Under the dim yellow light, his small fingers moved skillfully across the keys, each note filled with emotion, hope, and the pain he had endured. Grandma Marta sat quietly in a corner, her aging eyes always watching him with pride and love. She didn't say much, but each encouraging glance and nod of approval from her was an invaluable source of strength, helping Elijah grow more confident in the path he had chosen. While Elijah was practicing tirelessly, Mr. Whitaker wasn't idle. The powerful principal carefully calculated each of his moves. He secretly summoned a few close students, children from wealthy families, influential in the community, to his office, and subtly suggested that Elijah's performance would be a special act, something worth waiting for. With a sly, hidden smile, he planted the idea in these students' minds that Elijah was nothing more than a fool being put on stage for amusement. These whispered words quickly spread throughout the school, like a small spark waiting to ignite into a full-blown fire when the performance began. Gradually, the day of the talent show approached. The whispers grew louder, the prying eyes more pointed and malicious. Some students even openly discussed recording the performance to post online as a joke. While it stung Elijah's heart this time, he didn't waver. He simply smiled faintly and continued to focus on his practice. For Elijah, this wasn't just a performance. It was the defining moment to step out of the shadows that had held him captive in self-doubt and insecurity for years. Finally, the night before the performance arrived. Elijah sat at the old piano, his fingers gently gliding over the keys, his heart beating in rhythm with the sounds that filled the small room. In that quiet moment, he knew he was ready. No matter what happened tomorrow, no matter if the whole school turned their backs on him or laughed at him, it wouldn't matter. What mattered most was that Elijah knew who he was, and he knew what awaited him beyond the stage lights. And as the last traces of the night's moon faded, giving way to the first light of dawn, Elijah closed the piano, gazed at an old photo of his mother, and smiled gently. "I'll make it, Mom. Tomorrow I won't be anyone's joke anymore." The day of the performance finally arrived, bringing with it soft rays of sunlight streaming through the classroom window, gently illuminating Elijah's small, fragile hands. Throughout the morning, the atmosphere at Lincoln High was livelier than usual, filled with excited whispers and mockery. In the spacious hallways, groups of wealthy students huddled together, gossiping about the upcoming performance. Their eyes were gleaming with anticipation, but not to enjoy the art. They were waiting to witness a grand joke from the poor, quiet boy who always stood on the outskirts. In the principal's office, Mr. Whitaker sat silently before a large mirror, adjusting his tie meticulously. His face wore a calm expression, but behind it was a devious plan that he had carefully prepared. He had no doubt about the outcome of the performance. To him, Elijah was just a weak, poor boy stepping onto a stage far too big for him, completely out of his league. Whitaker smiled confidently, certain that in just a few minutes everyone would witness the boy's humiliating failure. That failure would serve as the clearest lesson for the other students, showing them their rightful place, a place he had long defined within the walls of this school. Meanwhile, Elijah stood in a small backstage corner, silently peering out at the stage through a tiny gap in the thick velvet curtain. His eyes met hundreds of eyes focused on the stage, filled with curiosity and mocking anticipation, all waiting for something comical to happen. His heart raced, his palms trembling with nervousness. But when his gaze shifted to the nearest row of seats, he spotted the familiar figure of his grandmother Marta. Today, she wore her best dress, her face full of pride and love. Her tender gaze was like a powerful force, filling Elijah's heart with strength, erasing the remaining fear. The voice of the announcer echoed clearly through the speakers. And now, please welcome the opening act for today, the piano performance by our new student, Elijah Turner. Immediately, the hall erupted in scattered applause, mixed with quiet, mocking laughter. Connor and his friends openly clapped loudly in a sarcastic manner. Mr. Whitaker stood by the side of the stage, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face as he watched Elijah walk slowly, alone, onto the stage. This was the moment he had been waiting for. A perfect opportunity to crush any remaining hope in that boy's heart. But as Elijah sat down before the grand piano, something unusual happened in his eyes. His trembling hands steadied, as though he had found the one point of support in his stormy life. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes briefly, and then his small fingers gently rested on the keys. The first notes rang out, pure and clear, immediately filling the vast space with an emotional intensity that was both enchanting and profound. There was no hesitation or nervousness in Elijah's playing now. Each note carried the weight of his suffering, his frustration, but also a fierce hope and extraordinary courage. The sound, like a cool stream, flowed through the hearts of the listeners, sweeping away any preconceived notions, replacing them with genuine respect and astonishment. The murmurs and mocking laughter that had filled the room quickly faded, replaced by absolute silence. The audience was suddenly entranced, as if drawn into the magic of Elijah's small fingers. Connor and his friends, who had been laughing earlier, now sat motionless, stunned by Elijah's undeniable talent. Even Mr. Whitaker, the powerful man who had stood there moments ago with a victorious look, now stood pale and wide-eyed, his plans to humiliate Elijah unraveling before his eyes. As the final notes faded, Elijah slowly opened his eyes. His heart was pounding, but it was filled with joy. He had truly shown who he was. The room remained silent for a few seconds, and then applause erupted from one corner, quickly spreading throughout the hall into a resounding, enthusiastic, and respectful standing ovation. Everyone stood and clapped, students, teachers, even those who had once mocked him. All now looked at Elijah with newfound admiration and awe. From the back of the auditorium, Grandma Marta watched with tears in her eyes, proud of her little grandson who had used his talent and courage to turn mockery into respect. Mr. Whitaker quietly retreated backstage, his steps heavy, his face bitter as he watched his seemingly perfect plan fall apart. For the first time in his life, the powerful man felt small and powerless in the face of the true strength of a boy he had once looked down on. On the stage, Elijah stood and bowed, smiling softly but with great pride. He knew that from this day forward, no one would ever look at him the same way again. His life, from this moment, had entered an entirely new chapter. As the applause gradually faded and Elijah stepped out of the bright lights of the stage, he had no idea that his life had completely changed from that moment onward. Now, each step Elijah took was met with respectful and admiring gazes, no longer the mocking looks or harsh whispers that once followed him. The performance had not only been a brilliant artistic success, but also an absolute triumph over the persistent prejudices he had endured since his first day at Lincoln High. In the days that followed, the change in the attitudes of the students was the most noticeable. Elijah, who had always quietly sat in the corner of the classroom, now received more greetings, with previously cold eyes softening into friendly and even admiring looks. Even Connor, who had been the ringleader of the cruel jokes aimed at him, had to alter his attitude. One morning, as Elijah entered the classroom, Connor stood up and gave a slight nod. Though no words were exchanged, that small gesture was enough for Elijah to understand that his self-respect had been rightfully restored. But the greatest change came from the teachers. Those who had once seen Elijah as a burden to be avoided now proudly mentioned his name, as if they had been part of the extraordinary performance. However, the one who left the deepest impression on Elijah was his music teacher, Miss Kendrick, a calm, reserved woman who had quietly observed him from a distance, but had never shown clear support before. One late afternoon, as Elijah finished his class and prepared to leave, he suddenly heard a gentle yet firm voice calling him from behind. "Elijah, can you spare a moment to meet with me?" He turned around to see Miss Kendrick standing there, her face serious, but her eyes warm and sincere. "Yes, of course," Elijah replied, feeling a little flustered by the unexpected invitation. In the quiet music room, Miss Kendrick watched Elijah for a long while, as if she were observing a newly discovered gem. "I've taught music for many years, Elijah, but rarely do I see a student play with such strong and genuine emotion as you. Your performance that day was truly a miracle." Elijah lowered his head, shy at the sincere compliment, but Miss Kendrick didn't let him linger too long in embarrassment. She gently continued, "I believe your talent isn't meant to be confined to just school performances. It deserves to be developed further." At this, Elijah looked up, curious yet slightly nervous. "What do you mean, Miss Kendrick?" She smiled softly, then pulled out a sealed envelope from her desk drawer and handed it to him with great care. "This is a letter of recommendation I secretly sent to the National Music Academy, one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the country. They watched a video of your performance and were very impressed. The Academy wants to invite you to attend a special audition next month." Elijah stared at the envelope in his hand, his heart pounding. It felt like all his dreams, things he thought were impossible to achieve, were now unfolding right before his eyes. "But, do you really think I can do it?" His voice trembled with emotion and a bit of self-doubt. "I have no doubts about your ability," Miss Kendrick said, looking him directly in the eye with firm conviction. "You've proven yourself in front of hundreds of people, in front of those who once tried to belittle you. Now it's time for you to prove it to yourself and to the world." Elijah stood silent, his eyes slightly red with emotion, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the woman standing before him. For so long he had been accustomed to being forgotten, dismissed, and doubted, but this was the first time he had received such unwavering trust from a teacher. "Thank you, I won't let you down," he replied with determination, his eyes glowing with resolve. Meanwhile, in the director's office, Mr. Whitaker sat alone in the dim light of his desk lamp, his face tense and filled with dissatisfaction. Since Elijah's performance, his position and authority had been significantly shaken. He no longer had full control over the atmosphere in the school, and even his decisions and statements were starting to face skeptical, even opposing looks from some teachers and parents. He knew well that that performance had not only been a musical showcase, but a direct challenge to the covert power and discriminatory management he had established for so long. Whitaker gritted his teeth, silently plotting a new plan to restore his control. He knew that to regain dominance, he needed to immediately crush the unexpected spotlight Elijah had gained. But what he didn't know was that this time he wasn't facing just a small boy. He was up against the strength of genuine talent and the love and trust of people who were beginning to wake up and realize where true value lies. As Elijah left the music room that evening, he walked lightly, his heart full of happiness and hope. He knew he was standing at the threshold of a great door, the door that would bring him closer to the dream his grandmother had whispered to him each night under the soft light of their little home. This was only the beginning. As Elijah walked out of the music room with the precious letter of recommendation from Miss Kendrick in his hands, he couldn't help but think of his grandmother Marta, the woman who had always quietly nurtured and developed his musical talent, even when their living conditions were incredibly poor. In his mind, vivid images of the past appeared clearly, as if it had just happened yesterday. All the beautiful and bitter memories flashed before his eyes. He remembered the small house tucked behind the old streets in the impoverished Eastwood neighborhood. It was a house pieced together from decaying wood, and every winter the cold wind would creep in, making Elijah and his grandmother huddle tightly together under old worn blankets to keep warm. There wasn't much in the house worth anything. Aside from an old bed, a small table, and a few creaky chairs, the only valuable possession his grandmother always made sure to protect was the old piano. Though it was worn and faded over the years, she polished it every day to keep it in the best condition possible. Grandma Marta worked as a cleaner in the wealthy homes of the city. Each day, before dawn, she would wake up early, quietly prepare a simple breakfast for Elijah, and then rush to catch the crowded bus. Her hands became increasingly calloused and rough from constant exposure to water and cleaning chemicals. But despite her struggles, every evening when she returned home, she always greeted Elijah with a gentle, loving smile. Those simple moments built Elijah's world, a world surrounded by warmth and the unconditional love and care of his elderly grandmother. Since his mother passed away from a serious illness and his father left without a word, Grandma Marta had been both a mother and father, dedicating her entire life to raising her only grandchild. During the hardest times when life seemed unbearable, she would gently tell him, "We may lack material things, Elijah, but we will never lack dignity. Remember, no matter how hard it gets, never let anyone look down on you." Elijah grew up in the loving arms and simple words of encouragement like that, and it was in that small house that he first touched the piano keys. The piano had originally been discarded by the wealthy family where Grandma Marta worked, but when she brought it home to Elijah, it became an invaluable gift, opening up a whole new, wonderful world before his eyes. Elijah clearly remembered the first time his small, trembling fingers touched the cold piano keys, and the first sound that came out, awkward but filled with joy. Grandma Marta sat beside him, smiling encouragingly and saying softly, "Just try it. Play as you like. I believe each note you play will carry your soul in it." From that day on, music became Elijah's closest companion. Even though Grandma Marta had no formal knowledge of music, she was always the one to encourage her little grandson to practice persistently. With the little money she earned from her cleaning job, she often went to the used bookstore to buy simple music theory books or old sheet music at a cheap price for Elijah. On quiet, late nights, under the yellow light of an old lamp, Elijah would practice diligently, with Grandma Marta sitting beside him, attentively listening to every note that filled their small home. Life was tough, but Grandma Marta never let their poor circumstances hinder the dream growing in Elijah's heart. Whenever she saw him gazing longingly at the music programs on their old TV, she would gently tell him, "One day, Elijah, you'll be on that stage, and I'll be the first one to clap for you." But reality was always harsher than the beautiful dreams. As Elijah grew older, the difficulties in life weighed heavier on Grandma Marta's frail shoulders. There was a time when Elijah discovered she had been hiding unpaid bills under the tablecloth, and tears silently fell from his eyes when he realized all the silent sacrifices she had made. But she always firmly refused whenever he suggested leaving school to help her work, always insisting, "You just need to focus on your studies and music. I believe in you. Never give up on your dreams." Grandma Marta's unwavering faith became an endless source of strength, helping Elijah overcome the difficult days. Every time he felt discouraged or doubted himself, she would gently place her warm hand on his shoulder and assure him, "Elijah, you don't know how big your talent is. Never doubt yourself, because I never will." When the acceptance letter from the Lincoln High Scholarship Program arrived, Grandma Marta cried tears of joy, her aging eyes glowing with immense pride. But deep down, a quiet worry also arose. Would her beloved grandson be strong enough to face the coldness and harsh prejudices at that wealthy school? Elijah understood his grandmother's concerns, but just as she had always believed in him this time, he would be the one to prove that all of her sacrifices had not been in vain. With a heart full of determination and boundless love for his beloved grandmother, he stepped into Lincoln High, ready to begin the journey that would change his life, not just his but also his grandmother's, the woman who had dedicated her life to supporting his dreams. While the emotional memories of his grandmother Marta were still vivid in Elijah's mind, at the principal's office at Lincoln High, Mr. Whitaker stood before the large window, looking down at the schoolyard with a cold gaze. Unlike his usual polished and perfect demeanor, his face now wore a pensive, grim expression. Elijah's unexpectedly outstanding performance had not only ruined his plan to mock the boy, but also severely shaken the power and authority Mr. Whitaker had carefully built over the years. Long before Elijah set foot at Lincoln High, Whitaker had covertly established a tightly controlled system designed to keep the school pure, catering only to the wealthy and powerful families. Behind the courteous exterior, calm voice, and persuasive speech, he easily deceived parents and education officials into believing he was a model educator who always cared about equality and the holistic development of students. But beneath that exterior lay a harsh truth. Whitaker viewed the presence of poor and minority students as a silent threat to the school's prestigious reputation and status. Throughout his tenure as principal, many talented students from ordinary or even poor families had been quietly suppressed by him through subtle and sophisticated methods. Scholarships were tightly controlled, and gifted students with difficult circumstances were often denied opportunities to participate in major events, or simply ignored in important activities. Whitaker even secretly tampered with evaluation reports, deliberately lowering the grades of students he deemed inappropriate according to his unspoken standards, isolating them and making it easier for them to give up. Whitaker didn't carry out these actions openly. Instead, he used his power subtly and skillfully, building a network of loyal or fearful teachers who executed his covert decisions without anyone questioning them. Only those truly observant and sensitive like Miss Kendrick could see through his true nature. Miss Kendrick had worked at Lincoln High for over 15 years, long enough to notice the increasing signs of injustice within the school. At first, she merely observed quietly, but over time, what she witnessed made it impossible for her to remain silent. When Elijah became the next target in Whitaker's malicious, discriminatory plan, it was the final straw that pushed her to stand up against him. Over the past months, Ms. Kendrick had been quietly gathering important evidence. Every altered document, every secret meeting designed to block the progress of disadvantaged students, had been meticulously documented. From small notes in teacher meetings to leaked personal emails from Whitaker, everything had been carefully kept, waiting for the right moment to bring the truth to light. One of the most significant pieces of evidence was the case of a Latinx student named Miguel Torres. Miguel had once been the pride of the school due to his exceptional math skills, but Whitaker, citing vague reasons like lack of cultural harmony, had forced Miguel to leave Lincoln High after continuously making things difficult and isolating him from important extracurricular activities. This action caused Miguel to lose confidence in himself, fall into depression, and transfer to another school quietly, with no one speaking out against it. A similar situation happened with an Asian girl named Jenny Lee, an award-winning writer who was never recognized by the school, simply because Whitaker believed that personal achievements weren't as important as maintaining the school's unified image. Stories like Miguel's and Jenny's were slowly connected by Miss Kendrick into a clear pattern of Whitaker's actions, all designed to maintain dominance and privilege for a group of wealthy students. And now, with Elijah emerging as a strong symbol against prejudice, Miss Kendrick saw that the time was right to act. Meanwhile, Whitaker, sensing increasing pressure from teachers and parents since Elijah's performance, became more cautious and meticulous. He began to suspect that some teachers, including Kendrick, might be turning against him, and this forced him to tighten his control even further. Secret meetings became more frequent, and he started to monitor the activities of minority students more closely, determined to crush any potential threat to his power and position. What Whitaker didn't realize was that, in his desperate and hasty actions, he was only exposing his mistakes and the schemes he had carefully hidden for so long. Step by step, Miss Kendrick and a few trusted colleagues had formed an underground network, ready to bring all of those dark truths to the light of justice. As for Elijah, though he wasn't fully aware of the dangers ahead, he remained determined and continued to move forward, fully trusting in his abilities and the unwavering support from his grandmother Marta and Miss Kendrick. In the world of false pretenses and the shadowy powers of Lincoln High, the quiet confrontation between justice and discrimination was growing more intense by the day, preparing to erupt at the perfect moment. As Mr. Whitaker grew increasingly tense and sought every way to solidify his crumbling power, at Lincoln High, an underground wave began to spread. This wave was named Elijah Turner. After Elijah's outstanding performance, the seemingly unbreakable walls of the school began to show the first cracks. And from those cracks, a powerful movement of resistance against prejudice and injustice was slowly rising. Elijah, who had never intended to be the center of anything, suddenly became the strongest symbol for the poor and minority students at the school. Every time he walked through the halls, the eyes of his peers no longer contained contempt, but instead curiosity, respect, and even a bit of admiration. Perhaps the biggest change came from students like Miguel and Jenny, those who had been disregarded and hurt in the past, who now dared to hold their heads up high with newfound confidence, finding strength in the image of a poor boy with exceptional musical talent. Miss Kendrick, who had always stood by Elijah and supported him from the very beginning, recognized that now was the perfect time for her to act even more boldly. She understood that one great performance from Elijah wasn't enough to dismantle the deep-rooted prejudice that Whitaker had instilled in the school for years. There needed to be a platform, a space where students who had been pushed to the margins could showcase their talents, proving that every student, regardless of their background, deserved to be treated with respect and fairness. After many days of quiet preparation, Ms. Kendrick decided to officially announce a new music event, a program with a very special name, Voces de Escola, Voices of the School. The goal of this event was clear: to create an open stage for all students, regardless of class or race, to share their stories through music and art. When the news of the Voces de Escola program spread throughout the school, it immediately sparked a strong wave of reactions. The lower-class students, who had been oppressed by Whitaker's hidden biases, felt for the first time that their voices truly mattered. They began to gather after class, excitedly signing up to participate, discussing their performances, and preparing the stories they wanted to tell. In contrast, Whitaker was furious when he learned about the event. He called Kendrick into his office, unable to hide his displeasure. "Miss Kendrick, I want to know the real purpose of this program. You understand my stance on activities that could cause division within the school." But Kendrick was not shaken by the clear pressure in his voice. She replied, calmly but firmly, "Mr. Whitaker, my program is not intended to divide. It's meant to create a truly equal and inclusive educational environment. The students have the right to speak up, to express themselves, something that I believe our school has somewhat forgotten." Whitaker furrowed his brow, his face cold, his voice laced with an implicit threat. "You'd better be careful with your actions, Miss Kendrick. Every decision in this school must go through my approval. I hope you don't want to face the consequences of these thoughtless actions." Although Kendrick knew Whitaker's threats were not empty words, she stood firm. Instead of fearing, she became even more determined because she knew that this wasn't just her battle or Elijah's. It was a fight for the rightful place of hundreds of students at Lincoln High. Unable to directly stop Kendrick, Whitaker began to find subtle ways to undermine the program from within. He secretly contacted a few trusted teachers, instructing them not to encourage students to participate, and tried to find every excuse to complicate the event's location, facilities, and funding. Whitaker believed that by creating enough difficulties, the program would collapse on its own without him needing to intervene directly. But what Whitaker didn't anticipate was the strength of unity and the spirit of resistance that had spread throughout the classrooms. Students began to realize that this was no longer just another event. It had become a symbol of the fight for justice and equality. They volunteered their efforts. Some made posters, others encouraged their peers to join, and some open-minded parents decided to support Kendrick by helping with funding and equipment. Elijah, though initially a bit shy with all the attention, boldly stepped forward to encourage his classmates to participate. He understood that this was no longer just his story. It was the shared story of everyone who had been discriminated against, oppressed, and looked down upon by outdated prejudices. Now, as he walked through the school grounds, Elijah felt a great responsibility on his shoulders, one that he was ready to bear with all the courage and pride he had. The battle between Kendrick and Whitaker, between the oppressed voices and the subtle autocracy of power, grew more intense with each passing day. And in the vibrant atmosphere of Voces da Escola, it became clear that a great change was slowly taking shape, waiting for the right moment to explode, a moment when Whitaker's dark power would have to face the overwhelming force of sincere voices from those he had intentionally ignored and oppressed for so many years. As the wave of support for the Voces da Escola program continued to grow and spread, in the office of the principal at Lincoln High, Mr. Whitaker began to lose all patience. The event he had thought was just a small joke to satisfy the egos of a few individuals like Kendrick had now turned into a powerful movement, directly threatening the tight control he had maintained for so many years. Whitaker never imagined that the very students he had always looked down upon and ignored could unite and become this strong. Unable to contain his anger any longer, Whitaker called for an emergency meeting, directly announcing the cancellation of the event on the grounds that it was inappropriate to the culture and spirit of the school. He also cited issues with safety, permits, and funding, determined not to let the program have a chance to take place. His firm and cold demeanor caused many teachers to feel uneasy, but Kendrick was not surprised by his move. She knew that this was the moment Whitaker would throw all his remaining cards to regain the power that was now being threatened. Immediately after the meeting, Kendrick gathered the students involved in the event and the supportive teachers in a small room. The atmosphere was initially quiet, and every gaze was filled with disappointment and confusion. But Kendrick's voice, full of determination and decisiveness, quickly dispelled the anxiety. "We cannot accept having our voices silenced once again. This program is for all of you, no matter who you are. If they want to stop us inside the auditorium, we will perform right outside on the school grounds, under the light of freedom." Her strong words immediately stirred the room, and the students stood up and clapped passionately. For the first time, they could truly feel the power of their unity. Plans for an outdoor event were quickly set into motion, regardless of the difficulties and barriers Whitaker had placed. The news quickly spread throughout the school. Even students who had previously been indifferent to the event were drawn into this enthusiastic atmosphere of resistance. Soon, the vast schoolyard of Lincoln High was transformed into a simple but meaningful outdoor stage. Students took it upon themselves to make banners and hang up emotional slogans. "Our voices are freedom. Every dream deserves to be heard." Both the school community and local residents began to take an interest in the event, and many parents and locals decided to come and support. From the window of his office, Whitaker saw the preparations and felt an anger he could not hide. He tried to order security staff to intervene, finding every reason to stop the outdoor event from taking place. But every effort he made was met with strong opposition from teachers and parents, who were no longer intimidated by the hidden power he had once imposed. Finally, the day of the event arrived. That afternoon, the Lincoln High School yard was filled with attendees. Students, teachers, parents, and local residents gathered in a scene like never before. While Whitaker stood silently from a distance, his face cold and malicious, he realized that he had failed to stop the event. Now, his final hope rested on the failure of the performances, to once again prove that his decision was correct. But what Whitaker couldn't anticipate was the latent power within the students, especially Elijah. When his name was called to the stage, the entire audience erupted into enthusiastic applause, with no trace of the mockery that had existed before. Elijah walked confidently but humbly onto the stage, his eyes directed at his grandmother Marta, sitting in the front row, her gaze filled with affection and pride. The sound of the piano filled the vast space, its deep notes reaching into every heart. This time, Elijah's performance was no longer a surprise. It was a clear testament to the true power of talent and determination. The audience sat in silence, listening intently, all understanding that this was not just a music performance but a powerful statement against the injustices and prejudices they had silently accepted for so long. When the final notes faded, the schoolyard erupted with prolonged, emotional applause. Many in the audience had tears in their eyes, and teachers and students exchanged proud and moved looks. Kendrick stood backstage, smiling with relief and happiness, knowing that from this moment on, Lincoln High would never be the same again. Whitaker quietly retreated to his office, his sense of defeat too overwhelming for him to lift his head. The more he tried to control, the more he exposed his tyrannical and ruthless nature, ultimately losing all his power to the strength of truth and the courage of those he had long despised. As Elijah stepped down from the stage, he was immediately surrounded by other students, those who had once ridiculed him, now embracing him with gratitude and admiration. Once again, the poor boy had triumphed, but this time he didn't just win for himself. He won for everyone who had been hurt by the prejudices that Whitaker had imposed. The outdoor event that day, with Elijah's music and Kendrick's unwavering determination, became the most powerful symbol of courage, justice, and the belief that everyone deserves to be treated fairly and with respect. From that day on, Lincoln High had turned a new page, and there would be no room for discrimination and injustice ever again. The outdoor performance ended not only with resounding applause but also left a profound echo in the hearts of everyone at Lincoln High. In the days that followed, the story of Elijah, Kendrick, and the Vozes da Escola event quickly spread beyond the walls of the school, attracting attention from both the local community and the regional media. For Whitaker, who had long been accustomed to controlling every piece of information and image related to the school, this event was nothing short of a disaster. The next morning, in his familiar office, an envelope from the Regional Department of Education was neatly placed on his desk, marked in bright red letters, "Urgent." Whitaker opened the envelope with slightly trembling hands, and the words inside made his face turn pale. The Department of Education announced that they would immediately launch an official investigation into allegations of discrimination, favoritism, and abuse of power at Lincoln High. From that moment, the power Whitaker had carefully built over many years began to truly waver, a probe that he could no longer easily control or extinguish. In the following days, a team of investigators from the Department of Education arrived at the school, beginning discreet interviews with teachers, students, parents, and school staff. At first, many were hesitant, cautious due to the pressure from Whitaker. But with strong encouragement and protection from Kendrick and brave colleagues, witnesses gradually became bold enough to speak out. Each story, each testimony began to uncover truths that Whitaker had long tried to conceal. The deeper the investigation went, the more the inspectors discovered about the subtle, sophisticated discriminatory actions Whitaker had used. Several longtime teachers revealed how he regularly manipulated student evaluation results, pressuring them to lower grades or deny opportunities to poor students or those from minority groups. Of particular seriousness were the cases of Miguel Torres and Jenny Lee, two students who had been pushed into depression and lost confidence due to Whitaker's unreasonable decisions, and now they bravely stood up to testify against him. With each passing day, the pressure on Whitaker grew. Even his closest allies began to turn away, realizing they could no longer protect him without tarnishing their own credibility. Even Connor, the son of a wealthy family and once a favorite student of Whitaker, publicly expressed regret and apologized to Elijah in front of the whole school, causing Whitaker to fall into an even deeper state of isolation. Miss Kendrick, who had long been preparing for this day, quickly provided all the evidence she had gathered over the years: edited emails, falsified reports, and recordings from secret meetings. Everything was handed over to the investigative team with absolute resolve. Among the evidence, the most important were the detailed notes on how Whitaker had systematically removed students he deemed unsuitable for the school's image. When the truth was revealed, both the school community and the public were stunned. Many parents, who had once trusted Whitaker as a model educator, now had to face the bitter reality that he had exploited that trust to carry out cruel and selfish plans. The outrage from the community quickly turned into enormous pressure. forcing the Regional Department of Education to make the toughest and clearest decision it had ever made. After nearly a month of intense investigation that morning, an urgent announcement was sent to all teachers, students, and parents of Lincoln High. Whitaker was officially suspended from his position as principal, pending serious disciplinary action for ethical violations and discrimination. This news immediately sent shockwaves through the entire school, marking the complete collapse of a man who had held absolute power for so long. The principal's office that day was emptier than ever. Whitaker sat silently behind his familiar desk, but now he was no longer a symbol of authority and power. Instead, he appeared completely defeated, his aging face pale, his cold eyes devoid of life. For the first time in his life, he understood that he had misjudged the strength of truth and the courage of those he had once looked down upon. Immediately after Whitaker's suspension, Kendrick was appointed as the interim leader of Lincoln High, entrusted with the monumental task of reforming the school. She wasted no time in implementing concrete plans to rebuild an educational environment based on fairness, where every student would have the opportunity to develop their talents without fear of prejudice. Several important reforms were quickly implemented. Scholarship programs were expanded, student evaluation processes were made transparent, and, notably, the Voces da Escola music event became an annual activity, representing the free voices and diversity of the school's students. Elijah, now a symbol of fairness and courage at Lincoln High, continued to work hard in his studies and pursue his passion for music. But what made him happiest was the joy in his grandmother Marta's eyes, knowing that all their struggles, sacrifices, and efforts had finally been rewarded. With Whitaker's downfall, Lincoln High had completely entered a new chapter, a chapter of transparency, fairness, and compassion, where every student was treated with true respect and value. From here, old wounds would heal, and a better future would be written by those like Kendrick, Elijah, and all those who dared to stand up against injustice. With the departure of Whitaker, Lincoln High seemed to emerge from a thick fog, finally embracing the fresh light of change and hope. When Kendrick was officially appointed as the head of the educational program, both students and teachers could clearly feel that the school had turned a new page, one that emphasized fairness, diversity, and respect for the arts more than ever before. From her very first day in her new position, Kendrick made a bold and clear statement. From today, Lincoln High will become a place where every student can walk with pride, where talent is nurtured, and where differences are celebrated. We will never allow prejudice to return. With that resolve, Kendrick began implementing a series of deep reforms within the school. Art programs and scholarships for talented students from low-income backgrounds were immediately expanded, no longer restricted as they had been in the past. Art, music, and cultural clubs, previously reserved for the wealthier students, now welcomed everyone, regardless of background or economic circumstances. Lincoln High slowly transformed into an environment where every voice was heard and every talent had the chance to shine. In this new atmosphere, Elijah's role became increasingly special and important. From a student once looked down upon and ridiculed, Elijah had now become a vibrant symbol of change, a clear testament that the unreasonable limits created by prejudice could be shattered by true courage and talent. Understanding the symbolic power Elijah held, Kendrick personally invited him to join the school's cultural committee, where he would play a leading role in guiding and organizing arts and cultural activities for all students. When Elijah received the special invitation, he initially felt a bit surprised and confused, but he quickly realized the significance of the position. This was not just an opportunity for him to express himself. It was also a responsibility he needed to take on, a responsibility to represent all those who had been hurt by prejudice and to show everyone that every student deserved to be respected and valued. For Elijah, joining the cultural committee wasn't just an honor, it was a challenge. But this time, he wasn't alone. By his side were Kendrick, Grandma Marta, and new friends, those who had also suffered from the invisible oppression at the school. It was their unwavering support that gave Elijah the strength to stand taller, more confident than ever. In the following days, the cultural committee, under Kendrick's guidance and with Elijah's active participation, planned and organized more diverse artistic activities than ever before. Music nights, art exhibitions, and cultural diversity discussions were held, attracting a wide range of students from all walks of life. Most notably, the Vozes da Escola music event, now an annual tradition, became one of the most anticipated programs, drawing even alumni to come back and share their stories. Alongside these positive activities, the lingering traces of Whitaker's dark past began to be completely erased. The rigid and biased regulations were eliminated, replaced by transparent, fair evaluation criteria that encouraged the holistic development of each student. Kendrick boldly addressed all teachers and parents. "We will never return to the time when an individual could manipulate and impose prejudice upon this school. From now on, Lincoln High will be a symbol of transparency, equality, and creativity." The school's atmosphere changed dramatically from that point on. Instead of whispers of ridicule or cold silence as before, the hallways were now filled with laughter and excited, friendly conversations. Students no longer had to avoid or fear being themselves. They walked proudly, confidently, expressing themselves and integrating into the school environment without fear of discrimination or pressure. Most notably, Elijah, with his new position in the cultural committee, proactively proposed several creative ideas, including building a new music and arts room, a space where students could freely create, practice, and interact with each other. This proposal quickly received strong support from students, teachers, and even parents, becoming one of the school's key projects. Just a few months after Whitaker's departure, Lincoln High had completely transformed. The school had not only restored its reputation and prestige, but had also become an ideal model for diversity and inclusion in education. Every time Kendrick and Elijah walked through the schoolyard, they were met with respectful and admiring looks from everyone, as living symbols of a new era, an era of kindness, equality, and belief in the true value of every individual. For Elijah, these positive changes meant that the sacrifices and efforts that both he and his grandmother Marta had gone through had finally been rightfully recognized. Now, every time he stood on the stage of Vozes da Escola, his heart would swell with happiness as he looked at Grandma Marta, sitting in the front row, her eyes brimming with proud tears, knowing that their journey to overcome prejudice and injustice had finally brought meaningful rewards to everyone around them. The comprehensive changes at Lincoln High not only marked an important turning point for the school, but also opened a completely new chapter in Elijah's life. The boy, who once bowed his head in silence before mockery and injustice, had now become a powerful representative of courage, talent, and change. In the days after being appointed to the school's cultural committee, Elijah realized that his path was no longer solitary. Every step he took now received enthusiastic support from everyone around him. Emerging from the shadows of the painful past, Elijah's musical talent was continuously nurtured and developed. He spent each day practicing diligently, and the once trembling notes from the old piano now became powerful, confident melodies, deeply reflecting the intense experiences and emotions of his life. Kendrick, always by his side encouraging and motivating him, recognized that Elijah's talent had far exceeded the boundaries of this small school and was deserving of greater recognition. One day, Kendrick brought Elijah news that made his heart swell with happiness. The top music academy in the region had carefully reviewed his recordings and decided to offer him a full scholarship for students with exceptional artistic potential. When Kendrick handed Elijah the scholarship letter, her eyes shone with pride. "I always knew this day would come, Elijah. You've overcome so many challenges and proven you deserve every success that comes your way." Elijah held the letter in his hands, his eyes brimming with emotion. This wasn't just an opportunity for him to develop his talent, but also a recognition of the efforts, courage, and boundless love from Grandma Marta, who had always silently supported and encouraged him through every difficult step. The news quickly spread throughout the school, and everyone who had known Elijah's story felt moved and proud. Genuine congratulations flooded in from all corners, and even those students who had previously doubted or ridiculed Elijah now came forward to congratulate him and show respect. To them, Elijah's story was not just about a poor boy overcoming his circumstances, but a living testament to the belief that anyone can reach their dreams with enough courage and determination. At the same time, performance invitations started pouring in for Elijah from all over the city. Community events, concerts, and large cultural exchanges wanted his presence, seeing him as a symbol of hope and positive change. Every time Elijah stepped onto the stage, he would always remember the image of Grandma Marta sitting in the front row, her eyes full of pride, adding strength and motivation to help him face every new challenge. Then, the most special moment arrived. Lincoln High decided to host a grand end-of-year performance to honor the school's outstanding achievements of the past year. This was also the event that all the teachers, students, and parents had been waiting for, to witness Elijah's final performance before he stepped into a new chapter of his life at the prestigious Music Academy. That evening, the Lincoln High Auditorium was packed with attendees. The seats were full, faces glowing with joy and excitement, eagerly awaiting the moment Elijah would appear. When his name was announced, the entire auditorium rose to their feet, clapping thunderously as never before. Elijah walked up to the stage, his heart overwhelmed with emotion. Standing before those who had witnessed his challenging journey, he was no longer the boy who feared the gaze of others. He had become a true artist, respected and admired by all. He sat down before the grand piano, closed his eyes for a moment, and memories of the entire journey came flooding back to him. The difficult but loving days with Grandma Marta, the pain of the injustices from Whitaker, the words of encouragement and invaluable support from Kendrick, all of it was embedded in the emotional and deep music that filled the room. This performance of Elijah was no longer just a music piece. It had become a moving symphony, a heartfelt tribute to all those who had stood by him during this journey. When the last notes faded, the entire auditorium was enveloped in a profound silence before erupting into endless applause. As he stood and bowed, Elijah could clearly feel the immense pride swelling in his heart. Below the stage, Grandma Marta's tears rolled down her cheeks, her smile radiant. Kendrick stood nearby, clapping endlessly, her eyes filled with uncontainable joy and pride. In that moment, Elijah understood that the challenging journey he had faced had finally culminated in glory. From a boy once looked down upon, Elijah had become a symbol of triumph over prejudice and injustice, the strongest proof that everyone deserves to be respected and treated fairly. Lincoln High was no longer Whitaker's school. It had become a place where every dream was respected, and every talent nurtured with love and compassion. And Elijah, with his steady steps, was ready to walk into a promising future, where he would continue to inspire and bring hope to many others on the path ahead. As the applause from the final performance at Lincoln High gradually faded, the echoes of Elijah's moving performance lingered in the hearts of everyone present. Elijah stood on the stage, his heart full of happiness and pride, his gaze sweeping over the crowd below, those who had witnessed every step of his challenging journey. Now, they looked at him not only with admiration but with a strong belief that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, could overcome prejudice to reach their dreams. Elijah's journey from a poor, forgotten boy to a symbol of change and hope had deeply inspired everyone present. His life was the clearest proof of a powerful message. No one is truly invisible when they live fully with passion and self-respect. He had shown that perseverance, courage, and a strong belief in oneself are powerful enough to break through all barriers of injustice and prejudice. In the days that followed, Elijah's story spread even further. Not only the students at Lincoln High, but the entire community began to speak of him as an example of resilience and extraordinary determination. Elijah became a role model for other young people, helping them believe in themselves, that anyone could change their fate and create a new future if they were truly determined. Under Kendrick's leadership, Lincoln High continued to move forward with extensive reforms. New values were carefully cultivated, slowly erasing the dark shadows of the past under Whitaker's rule. All students were now encouraged to live authentically, develop their talents freely, and most importantly, to always maintain mutual respect and dignity. Whitaker, who had once represented all that was wrong and unjust, had now completely disappeared from the picture. His failed attempts to maintain power through control and oppression had finally collapsed before the unstoppable force of truth and courage. His downfall wasn't just the end of an old chapter. It had opened the door to a new era, an era of transparency, fairness, and love at Lincoln High. More than anything, Elijah's story was no longer just his own. It had become a shared message for all those who had ever felt overlooked or dismissed. Through Elijah, people realized that no matter how humble their beginnings or how difficult their circumstances, everyone deserved respect and the chance to prove their true worth. Elijah understood that what he had achieved today wasn't just for himself, but a deep thank you to Grandma Marta, who had always quietly stood by him, sacrificing her life to nurture her grandson's big dream. Grandma Marta's eyes now always shone with joy and pride, knowing that all the sweat, tears, and boundless love she had given Elijah had finally borne fruit in such a meaningful way. At the graduation ceremony at Lincoln High, Kendrick gave an emotional final speech dedicated to Elijah and all the students of the school. Elijah has taught us all a truly valuable lesson, that anyone, no matter how burdened by prejudice or injustice, can rise if they have enough belief in themselves and the courage to keep moving forward. Remember Elijah's story, and never give up on your dreams and your worth. No one is invisible when they live fully with passion, self-respect, and courage. At the end of her speech, the entire auditorium stood up and applauded continuously. Elijah stood next to Grandma Marta, holding her hand tightly, his eyes glistening with tears. He knew that he had truly succeeded, not only in overcoming his personal challenges, but in changing the perception of so many people around him about the true value of every individual. After the ceremony, Elijah walked out of the gates of Lincoln High with a heart full of belief and hope. Before him was the prestigious music academy waiting for him, bigger stages, and new challenges that he was ready to embrace. But the most important thing was that he knew he would never be alone again. He had inspired and left an unforgettable mark at this place, where now the light of justice, diversity, and kindness shone brightly. Looking back at his entire journey, Elijah understood the biggest message he had learned, that everyone deserves a chance to be heard, respected, and to live with their true passion. As long as one holds firm to their belief, lives fully with passion and self-respect, anyone can overcome prejudice and become the best version of themselves. Elijah's story, from his difficult and bitter days to becoming a respected artist, will forever stand as the clearest proof that courage, belief, and talent will always triumph over prejudice and injustice. And in the world we live in, there will no longer be room for discrimination or disdain when each person dares to stand up and live true to their own values. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share this video to inspire others, and especially subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next meaningful stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the upcoming videos.